Black woman CEO's seat taken by white passenger. Minutes later, karma stops the entire flight. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Get up or get out. People like you don't belong in business class. The words sliced through the cabin before the engines even warmed. Not whispered, not hidden. Spit out in the middle of a luxury aircraft where the leather seats still smelled new and the overhead chandelier's miniature crystal installations glowed soft gold. Heads turned instantly. A woman in a bright yellow suit, seated calmly by the window in 3A. Didn't blink. Her hands rested lightly on the folded magazine in her lap, her posture perfect, her silence dangerous. The man towering over her, a white passenger in a pale blue polo, jabbed a finger toward her face, breath hot with entitlement. "I said move," he barked, voice raised for the entire cabin to hear. "She doesn't have the ticket for this seat. Look at her. She's clearly in the wrong cabin." Behind him, phones clicked open like predators stretching awake. Passengers angled their cameras from behind leather headrests. Someone whispered, "What's happening?" Someone else murmured, "I knew she boarded late. Maybe she's trying her luck." The aisle parted as a captain uniform, crisp, jaw tense, stepped forward to intervene. "Mom," he said, gesturing with that practiced tone reserved for troublesome passengers. "We need you to cooperate so we can stay on schedule." The man beside him scoffed loudly. "Cooperate? She's in my seat. Kick her back to economy. This isn't complicated." The captain didn't correct him. He didn't even check her boarding pass. He simply nodded at the man, as if hierarchy had been decided the moment he looked at their faces. Cameras lifted higher. The cabin leaned in. Rows of stitched leather and polished wood suddenly felt like a courtroom. The woman in the yellow suit finally looked up slowly, deliberately, her eyes meeting the captain's first, then the irate passengers. No fear, no flinch. Just stillness so precise it shifted the air around her. Her voice, when it came, was quiet enough to make everyone listen. "I'm seated exactly where I belong." The man barked a laugh. "Oh, please. You people always say that. Show them your ticket." A ripple passed through the aisle, uncomfortable, charged, thick. The captain crossed his arms. "Mom, unless you can verify your assignment immediately, we will have to remove you from this seat." He didn't say if you belong here. He said unless you prove you do. Phones rose higher. A woman behind them whispered to her boyfriend, "Why is she acting like she owns the place?" One row over, another passenger muttered, "Shays," slowing everyone down. "Just move." But the woman didn't rise. She didn't argue. She didn't look away. Instead, she set the magazine aside, reached into a thin leather sleeve tucked neatly under her arm, and paused just 1 second, letting the silence harden like cooling glass. Before she could speak, the ambient cabin noise dipped. Even the low hum of the AC vents seemed to hush. Something was shifting. Not dramatically, not loudly, but unmistakably. Because she wasn't the one who looked uncertain. They were. Phones rose higher. A woman behind them whispered to her boyfriend, "Why is she acting like she owns the place?" One row over, another passenger muttered, "She's slowing everyone down. Just move." But the woman didn't rise. She didn't argue. She didn't look away. Instead, she set the magazine aside, reached into a thin leather sleeve tucked neatly under her arm, and paused just 1 second, letting the silence harden like cooling glass. Before she could speak, the ambient cabin noise dipped. Even the low hum of the AC vents seemed to hush. Something was shifting. Not dramatically, not loudly, but unmistakably. Because she wasn't the one who looked uncertain. They were. The entitled passenger stepped forward again, voice trembling with anger and something he wasn't ready to name, fear. "You'd better get up before you're thrown out. You're already holding up the flight." That was when she looked at him fully, calm, precise, measuring the weight of his words. And she said a single line that made the entire row behind her go silent. "Are you sure you want to speak to me that way? Here?" A flicker crossed the captain's face too fast for most to notice, but not for the cameras recording every breath of this confrontation. The man sputtered. "Don't talk in riddles. You don't belong in this seat." She tilted her head, the gold cabin light catching the edges of her yellow suit like fire on silk. "Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story." When the narration faded, the woman in the yellow suit finally lifted her boarding pass. Not defensively, not to prove herself, but like someone presenting a verdict. Row numbers, seat assignment, loyalty level, all printed in bold, undeniable clarity. The angry passenger froze. The captain blinked. A murmur rolled through the cabin. And before anyone could speak, the crew's tablet chimed with a notification none of them expected. Executive level passenger flag. Verify immediately. The shift had begun. And the plane, like the truth, was no longer going anywhere until she allowed it to. The cabin didn't return to normal after the captain spoke. It didn't even breathe. A hush rippled down the aisle the way light bends across water, soft at first, then unmistakable. Every seatback screen flickered with delayed reflections of faces turned in one direction, toward the woman in the bright yellow suit, still seated in 3A, as if her spine were carved from something steadier than bone. The man who had shouted at her red in the cheeks now took another step forward, emboldened by the captain standing at his side. "See? Even the pilot agrees. You don't belong here." He spoke loud enough for row 7 to hear. No one corrected him. Not yet. The woman in yellow didn't look at him this time. She looked past him, past the uniform, past the entitlement, past the stale confidence of a man who'd never been told no. Her gaze slid toward the narrow galley where the senior flight attendant hovered, clutching her tablet like a shield. The hum of the overhead vents tightened. Someone in the last row coughed into the silence. A seatbelt clicked as a woman instinctively leaned closer to her boyfriend, whispering without lowering her phone. "This is gonna blow up on TikTok." The captain shifted his weight uncomfortably. He had expected her to get up, to apologize, to shrink. She did none of those things. She simply adjusted the cuff of her yellow sleeve, smooth, controlled, and kept her chin lifted. It made the entire cabin lean back, just slightly. The senior flight attendant finally stepped closer, tapping her tablet nervously as she forced a professional smile. "Mom, perhaps we can find you another seat just for now." "Why?" the woman asked calmly. Not aggressive, not sarcastic, just precise, like she was measuring the angle of the blade before the cut. The attendant faltered. "Because, there seems to be a conflict with him." The woman nodded subtly toward the man beside the captain. "Not with the system." A flicker crossed the attendant's face. She checked the tablet again, swiping fast as if hoping the truth had changed in 2 seconds. It hadn't. Passengers began murmuring. "She seems really confident. What if she is in the right seat? Why didn't he check her ticket first? Dude's gonna get sued for this." The man grew irritated by the whispers. He jabbed a thumb at himself. "I paid for this seat months ago. I fly this airline every week." The captain nodded stiffly. "I understand, sir. Well, resolve this." But the woman in yellow finally turned to him, meeting his eyes fully for the first time. "You're making decisions without information," she said. A murmur passed like a breeze through the cabin. The captain's jaw tightened. "Mom, I'm responsible for safety and compliance. If you can't verify your assignment, I already did," she replied. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. She extended her boarding pass, not shaking, not rushed, holding it like a quiet accusation. "Business class. Seat 3A. Priority tier. Executive." A glint of gold embossed on the top corner made the attendant inhale sharply. The man scoffed, louder this time. "Anyone can Photoshop that. Don't fall for it." Phones lifted higher. The captain took the pass, scanning it with his device, but the moment he did, the tablet chirped again, not the soft tone of a regular scan. A heavier note, a priority alert. The crew's screens flashed. "Executive level verification required. Do not reassign seat." The attendant froze. The captain frowned. The man stepped back, confused for the first time. The woman in yellow tilted her head slightly, watching them. "Is there still a conflict?" she asked. The cabin held a collective breath. The captain swallowed. "There. Seems to be an unexpected restriction on this seat, he murmured. The man bristled. What restriction? It's my seat. But the attendant shook her head slowly. No, sir, she whispered. It isn't. The cabin shifted an invisible pivot, subtle but seismic. Passengers sat up straighter. Phones moved closer. Whispers turned into speculation. Something's happening. She's someone important. Look at the captain's face. The man's voice cracked with rage. What? This is ridiculous. Why is her ticket pulling priority over mine? The woman in yellow finally looked at him again, calm in a way that made the air pressure feel different. You assumed the system was on your side, she said. But the system knows exactly who belongs here, and for the first time since the confrontation began, he stepped back. Even the captain didn't breathe. The shift had started. No one understood it yet, but the cabin did. The tension, the silence, the weight, it was all moving. Toward her. For a moment, no one in the cabin moved. The aircraft seemed suspended, not in altitude, but in certainty. A stillness so complete it felt like gravity had paused, waiting for the truth to form. The captain glanced again at his tablet, brow furrowed. He tapped the screen twice, then a third time, as if the system might correct itself out of embarrassment. It didn't. The alert remained bold and immovable. Executive level passenger flag, do not override. The senior flight attendant leaned in to see it, and her breath hitched a tiny sound, but loud enough for row 4 to hear. Meanwhile, the man who had spent the last minutes towering over the woman in yellow suddenly looked smaller. The color drained from his face. His arm, once raised in accusation, hung awkwardly at his side. What does that even mean? He demanded, voice cracking. The captain didn't answer him. He turned toward the woman instead. Mom, would you mind confirming your name for the record? She didn't rush. She didn't fidget. She simply settled deeper into her seat, owning it more completely than anyone else in business class ever had. Amara, she said. Amara Lewis. Silence pulsed outward like a shockwave. The name meant nothing to most passengers, yet in the cockpit, in the airline's boardroom, in the shareholder meeting minutes, it meant everything. The captain swallowed again, suddenly aware of how straight he was standing. He typed her name into the internal registry. The tablet didn't hesitate. Priority match status, executive contributor holding, board influence tier. The attendant's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God, someone whispered 2 rows back. Board influence? That's like owning a piece of the airline. The man stammered, No, that can't be right. She can't be. But the tablet chimed again before he could finish. Secondary verification complete. Seat 3. Allotted to passenger. A. Lewis restriction. Do not remove. It was over. At least for him. But Amara wasn't done. She reached for her portfolio, not hurriedly, not theatrically, but with the same elegance as someone closing a deal worth more than the aircraft itself. Inside, neatly arranged, was her platinum-tier shareholder credential, a sleek, metal card, embossed with the airline's crest. She didn't display it. She didn't flaunt it. She simply angled it so the captain could see the reflection of his own face in the polished surface. His throat tightened. Miss Lewis, he said softly, I apologize. This was an oversight. No one had ever heard a captain apologize with that tone before. It didn't sound rehearsed. It sounded like someone suddenly aware they had been speaking to the wrong authority. The man sputtered again, desperate now. I didn't know who she was. She didn't look. He stopped himself too late. The damage of the words hung in the air, ugly, unmistakable. Passengers winced. Phones rose higher. The cabin shifted again, but this time the gravity moved sharply away from him. Amara didn't stand. She didn't lash out. She didn't even glare. She simply said, Seat 3A is mine. That was always true, no matter who believed it. The captain straightened, shame creeping into his posture. Yes, Miss Lewis, it is. He turned to the man. Sir, I'll have to ask you to return to your assigned seat immediately. My assigned? I thought... You thought wrong, the attendant said quietly, unable to hide the steel in her voice. A wave of murmurs swept through the cabin. Passengers exchanged looks, some sympathetic toward Amara, others stunned that the man who had been so loud minutes ago was shrinking into himself. "Return to your seat," the captain repeated. This time, it wasn't a request. The man stepped back unsteadily, nearly tripping over the aisle divider as he retreated to row 10. Economy plus. The seat head tried to escape. Passengers tracked him with their eyes the entire walk of shame. But the cabin wasn't done shifting. The attendant returned to Amara's side, hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Miss Lewis," she said, voice trembling with sincerity, "is there anything you need before we depart?" Amara looked at her not unkindly but clearly. "I need the crew," she said, "to follow procedure, not prejudice." The attendant's eyes stung with something that looked like remorse. "We will, ma'am." From this moment forward, a quiet hum spread through the cabin. Not tension this time. Recognition, respect, and for the captain the first glimmer of fear for what this delay would mean for him. The unraveling had begun, and the flight, whether anyone liked it or not, was no longer going anywhere until Amara Lewis said so. The air inside the cabin felt heavier now, as if the aircraft itself understood what had just shifted. Rows of passengers watched the scene with rapt silence, their screens forgotten, their headphones hanging unused. Everything pulsed toward one center point, the woman in the yellow suit. Amara Lewis didn't gloat. She didn't bask in the unraveling. She simply sat there composed, unbothered, while the man who had belittled her hunched into his economy plus seat like someone hiding from the truth, head crafted. The captain remained standing beside her, row posture stiff, mind racing. He wasn't just thinking about company policy anymore. He was thinking about the consequences of violating it, especially in front of someone with the title Board Influence Tier. The senior flight attendant hovered behind him, tablet pressed to her chest as if shielding herself from the judgment she now anticipated. Amara closed her portfolio quietly. No sharp sound, no theatrics, just a single soft click of leather folding into itself. That alone made the captain flinch. She finally looked up at him. "Captain," she said evenly, "this incident was preventable." He swallowed. "I agree, Miss Lewis, entirely. You chose to believe a man who raised his voice," she continued. "Not the document in front of you, not the system, not the truth." Each sentence landed like a slow drop of ice water down his spine. "That was my mistake," he whispered. "No," Amara corrected gently. "It was your assumption." Passengers shifted, some nodding subtly. Even those who hadn't spoken knew exactly what she meant. The captain nodded, shame coloring his expression. Before he could respond, the senior flight attendant's tablet chimed again. A small red icon blinked insistently. She tapped it, then froze. "Captain," she whispered, We have an issue." He leaned over her shoulder. Another alert glowed. "Report initiated executive passenger incident ground control review. Required delay takeoff until cleared." The captain's eyes widened. Row 5. Gasped softly. Passengers leaned in as whispers swept through the cabin. What does that mean? They can't take off? Is she shutting the plane down? Is this real? The captain straightened slowly, the weight of the message settling onto his shoulders. "Miss Lewis," he said carefully, "ground control has flagged this situation. Takeoff is on hold." Amara's eyebrows lifted, not in surprise, but in acknowledgement. Of course it was. The man in row 10, a shrinking blue dot of embarrassment, shot up from his seat. "This is insane," he shouted. "We're all being delayed because of her?" A few passengers glared at him. Someone muttered, "Because of you, actually." Another whispered, "Sit down before you make it worse." The captain turned sharply toward the man. "Sir, remain seated. You've already violated boarding procedures. Don't escalate this." The man sank back into his seat, rage burning behind his humiliation. Amara maintained her calm, her tone surgical. "Captain, ground control is following protocol. I expect the same from you." "Yes, Miss Lewis." "And before we proceed," she added, her gaze gliding over him and the attendant behind him, "I'd like to understand something." The captain stiffened. "Of course. When I showed my boarding pass," she said, "why was your first instinct to assume fraud?" The words weren't loud, yet the entire cabin heard them. The attendant inhaled sharply. Passengers stared. The hum of the plane grew loud in the silence. The captain's throat tightened. I made a wrong assumption. About my integrity? Amara asked. Yes. About my right to sit here? Yes. And about who belongs in a seat like this? The captain looked down. Yes, Miss Lewis. A tremor of discomfort rippled through the cabin. The truth, spoken aloud, scraped the room clean. Amara let the moment linger not out of vengeance but clarity. Then she said, Good, because acknowledgement is the first step to correction. The captain exhaled shakily. We're awaiting instructions from ground, he said quietly. Once they clear us, we will proceed. Then we wait, Amara replied. Not defeated, not demanding, just factual. Passengers looked at her with a new expression, respect born not from fear, but from the kind of composure that made chaos rearrange itself. She turned back to her window, the sunlight catching the gold tones of her suit, painting her silhouette in quiet authority. And for the first time since the confrontation began, the captain stepped back, not because she needed space, but because she commanded it. The longer the plane sat still, the more the truth gathered weight. Passengers watched the aisle like it was a stage. Phones hovered at chest level. Seatbelt signs glowed above rows of growing tension. But row 3A, where Amara Lewis sat, held a different energy entirely. Stillness, control, authority without a raised voice. The senior flight attendant returned from the galley, tablet pressed tight against her uniform. Her hands trembled, not from fear of Amara, but from fear of what had been discovered. Captain, she whispered, leaning close. Ground control sent additional details. He glanced at the tablet, expecting an update. What he read instead drained the last of the color from his face. System findings. Incident flagged for discrimination. Potential violation of Executive Passenger Code Crew. Handling under review. Mandatory documentation required. Hold flight until corporate investigates. His breath shuddered. This wasn't a simple delay anymore. This was an inquiry. Passengers shifted with restless curiosity as the captain approached Amara again, not with the confidence of a man in charge, but with the posture of someone awaiting judgment. Miss Lewis, he said quietly, corporate has intervened. She lifted her gaze, calm as still water. Of course they have, she replied. That's what happens when protocol is ignored. The man in row 10, the one who had initiated all of this, shot up again, unable to contain himself. This is insane. He pointed wildly at Amara. Why is the airline bending over backwards for her? She's just... But he never finished, because the senior attendant finally snapped not loudly, but with a tone sharpened by reality. Sir, sit down. You are the one who caused this investigation. Passengers oohed under their breath like school children witnessing justice in motion. The man's face twisted in rage. I caused nothing. Shay's the reason we're delayed. Amara didn't even turn toward him. The delay is the cost of your assumptions, she said softly. It hit him harder than a shout. The captain cleared his throat, attempting to regain control. Ground control is requesting statements, he said. From crew first, then involved passengers. A nervous flutter moved through the attendants, because they knew what their statements would reveal. Every decision, every bias, every moment they'd chosen to listen to volume over validity. The senior attendant inhaled shakily, tapping her tablet to begin recording her account. Before she could speak, the system auto-filled segments. Timestamp, passenger confrontation initiated. Raised voice detected. Failure to verify boarding pass. Executive passenger mishandled bias-based conflict possible. Her eyes widened. The system, it logged everything, she whispered. Of course it had. Modern aircraft logged everything. Amara watched her, expression unreadable. It's designed that way, she said, so the truth doesn't depend on who speaks first. A ripple of understanding passed through the attendants. The captain rubbed his temples. He could already imagine the phone call waiting for him once they landed if he was allowed to fly the plane at all. The man in row 10 slumped back, sweat gathering at his temples. This is ridiculous. All because she thinks she's important, he muttered. Amara turned her head just enough for him to see her profile, cool, unbothered, precise. I didn't say I was important, she said. The airline system did. The cabin reacted in a soft uproar, whispers, gasps, even a suppressed laugh. The captain took a steadying breath and spoke to the entire cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We are experiencing a procedural delay due to an internal review. We expect updates shortly. He didn't mention the reason. He didn't have to. Everyone already knew. The attendants began moving down the aisle, not to serve drinks, but to gather passenger statements. One approached Amara. "Miss Lewis," she said, voice trembling with respect. "Corporate is requesting your account last." "Last?" Amara's eyebrow lifted. "That's unusual." The attendant swallowed. "It's because your statement carries the most weight." Ah, there it was. The cabin processed those words like an unexpected turbulence. The man who had screamed earlier shrank even deeper into his seat. The captain stepped away from Amara's row, slow, deliberate steps like someone backing away from a fire he had accidentally started. And Amara. She simply folded her hands in her lap, the fabric of her yellow suit glowing softly under the cabin lights. She didn't celebrate. She didn't demand anything. She just waited, because she knew when systems correct themselves, they correct everything around them. And somewhere in the cockpit, a new alert chimed, one that would change the tone of the entire investigation. The chime from the cockpit wasn't loud, but it pierced the cabin with the precision of a scalpel. A single note, clean, clinical, followed by a silence so sharp the passengers straightened instinctively. The captain hurried forward, disappearing behind the cockpit door. The senior flight attendant, still holding her tablet, hovered like she expected the aircraft itself to deliver a verdict. Row by row, passengers felt it. Something bigger than bias, bigger than anger, bigger than embarrassment, was about to land. Minutes passed slow, heavy, absolute. When the captain finally emerged, his face carried a new color. Not anger, not annoyance, fear, not the kind that made a man tremble, the kind that made a man stand very, very still. He approached Amara again, but the authority he once projected was gone, stripped clean, replaced by something that looked like respect and worry. "Miss Lewis," he said softly, "corporate has escalated the review." She didn't move. Escalated how? The senior attendant stepped closer, lowering her voice even though the entire cabin was listening. "There's an external audit team joining the investigation." A ripple of confusion passed through the passengers. External? On a plane? How? But Amara's expression didn't shift. She had expected this. The captain continued, struggling to keep his voice steady. Corporate sent a remote command. "They've activated in-transit compliance mode. It requires an independent auditor to review crew conduct, passenger handling, and bias indicators." More murmurs. "What does that mean?" someone whispered. The senior attendant answered quietly, almost reverently. "It means this flight cannot move until an auditor steps on board." A gasp rippled through the cabin. The flight's grounded? At the gate? Is this because of the incident? It was all rhetorical. Everyone knew the answer. Amara folded one leg over the other, the yellow fabric shimmering under the overhead lights. "And how long," she asked calmly, "until they arrive?" The captain swallowed. "They're already here." Before the words finished leaving his mouth, the boarding bridge door hissed open. Every head turned. A pair of black dress shoes crossed the threshold, first polished, quiet, purposeful. Then a tailored charcoal suit. Then a badge clipped to a minimalist leather wallet. Airline Corporate Audit and Ethics Division. The cabin reacted like it had seen a ghost. An auditor was not a normal sight. Not for delays, not for simple disagreements, only for serious failures or serious people. The auditor, a tall man with measured steps and a calm, analytical presence, entered the cabin without acknowledging the stares. His eyes swept the aisle with precision reading posture, tension, fear, guilt. He didn't look at Amara right away. He didn't need to. His gaze halted on the captain first. "You initiated the override?" the auditor asked. The captain nodded nervously. "Yes, sir." "And you escalated the complaint?" I believed the situation required intervention." The auditor's eyes flicked to the senior attendant. Her tablet trembled in her hands. "You misidentified the passenger in 3A?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. And you attempted to reassign her seat without documented cause?" Her voice cracked. "Yes." Passengers held their breath. Even the man in row 10 sat stone still. His earlier bravado evaporated into raw dread. The auditor finally turned toward Amara, and the entire cabin watched the shift in his posture, the straightening of his back, the softening of his expression, the quiet acknowledgement reserved for people whose influence didn't need introduction. "Miss Lewis," he said with a bow of his head, "we apologize for the misconduct you experienced." The words rolled through the cabin like thunder, muffled under velvet. The man in row 10 covered his face with both hands. The captain stared at the floor, and the attendants stood frozen, praying the ground would open beneath them. Amara remained composed. "Thank you," she said, "but apologies alone don't realign procedures." The auditor nodded. "Which is why I'm here." He tapped his badge, activating a series of commands. The senior attendant's tablet vibrated violently, lines of system text scrolling too fast for her to process. Passenger control logs, crew behavior timestamps, bias detection markers, recorded dialogue triggers, cross-referenced against her own voice. Her knees almost buckled. The auditor turned to the captain. "You'll step off the aircraft," he said calmly, effective immediately. The cabin gasped as the captain blinked in shock. "Am I being removed from duty?" "Yes," the auditor replied. "Pending review." The silence that followed was brutal. The attendants trembled. The passengers stared. The man in row 10 shrank like he wanted to disappear entirely. And Amara? She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply watched the system correct itself, one piece at a time. Because this wasn't revenge. This was gravity returning to its proper place. The captain's slow walk toward the exit felt like a funeral procession. Not loud, not rushed, just heavy-weighted with the realization that authority, when misused, always circles back. Passengers watched him step off the aircraft, one foot crossing the threshold, then the next, his shoulders folding inward as the boarding bridge swallowed him whole. The door hissed shut behind him with a finality that vibrated through the cabin. The auditor didn't pause. He turned toward the attendants next. They straightened instinctively, as if posture could undo what had already been recorded. "Residual compliance checks will continue," he said. "Stand by for reassignment decisions." His tone wasn't cruel. It was clinical. The tone of someone who had dealt with this exact scenario more times than he cared to count. Passengers whispered in electric tension. "This is serious. Is she really that high level? I've never seen an auditor board mid-delay. This is above corporate, it feels. Federal." But all eyes drifted back to Amara. Because everything orbiting the cabin, the fear, the consequences, the respect seemed to anchor around her. Row 10 seconds disgraced, passenger pressed himself against the window, wishing he could vanish. He didn't dare stand. He didn't dare speak. Not after the system had replayed his own words for the crew. Not after recognizing that the woman he attacked wasn't just in the right seat, she was the highest-ranking non-flight authority on the aircraft. The auditor approached her with deliberate steps. "Miss Lewis," he said. "Ground control would like to know if you intend to file a formal complaint." The cabin held its breath. This was the moment many expected her to unleash the fury she had earned. To demand firings, reparations, public statements, disciplinary hearings. Instead, she lifted her eyes, slow, steady, and answered with the kind of restraint that made even the auditor inhale. "I intend," she said, "to file an accurate one." A soft gasp traveled through the aisles. Because accuracy, coming from someone like her, meant devastation for those who had chosen the wrong side of the truth. The man in row 10 squeezed his eyes shut. He knew his words would be replayed, transcribed, archived. He knew the airline would see everything. He knew he had handed them the rope. The auditor nodded respectfully. "Then the investigation will proceed." As he turned to leave, something unexpected happened. A woman in row 4, middle-aged, kind eyes, shaking hands, called out softly, "Miss Lewis, I saw everything. If you need my statement, I'll give it." Another voice followed, then another, then another. "I recorded it. I'll testify." He was out of line. Crew handled it wrong. You were calm the whole time. That man threatened you. A collective shifting of conscience. Not because they suddenly became heroic, but because the room had recalibrated its axis. She hadn't changed. They had. Amara didn't revel in it. She simply inclined her head once. "Thank you." The auditor nodded, satisfied. He stepped off the aircraft to finalize the preliminary findings. The moment the door sealed again, the cabin exhaled as if released from pressure. But no one, not even the attendants, looked away from Amara. Because what they all understood now was simple. Power didn't need altitude. Power didn't need volume. Power just needed the truth, and the truth had finally taken its seat. The auditor's departure left a hum behind, a charged quiet that felt like the cabin itself was bracing for impact. Moments later, every seatback screen blinked awake at once. A corporate broadcast. Passengers straightened. A simple message appeared in clean white text against a black screen. Executive Passenger Misconduct Report. Under immediate review, flight delayed pending resolution. Gasps rippled through the aircraft. Everyone already knew. The attendants began moving down the aisle, not to serve drinks, but to gather passenger statements. One approached Amara. "Miss Lewis," she said, voice trembling with respect. "Corporate is requesting your account last." "Last?" Amara's eyebrow lifted. "That's unusual." The attendant swallowed. "It's because your statement carries the most weight." Ah, there it was. The cabin processed those words like an unexpected turbulence. The man who had screamed earlier shrank even deeper into his seat. The captain stepped away from Amara's rose, slow, deliberate steps like someone backing away from a fire he had accidentally started. And Amara? When the screens dimmed and the cabin settled into a rare, reverent quiet, Amara reached down and smoothed the sleeve of her yellow suit. Not to compose herself, she had never been undone, but to mark the moment. A flight attendant approached, voice small, almost hopeful. "Miss Lewis, ground control has cleared departure. We're ready whenever you are." Amara rose just slightly in her seat, the kind of movement that felt like a final signature. "Then let's fly," she said. Simple, calm, unshaken, respect. And as the aircraft prepared to leave the gate, the cabin carried a new truth. Respect had finally taken its rightful place at 3A. The cabin lights softened as the engines rumbled back to life, a steady hum replacing the tension that once choked the air. Amara eased into her seat, fastening her belt with the quiet certainty of someone who never needed permission to belong. Across the aisle, passengers watched her not with pity, not with fear, but with a newfound recognition. A flight attendant approached, steadier than before. "Thank you for your patience, Miss Lewis." Amara offered a single nod, eyes drifting to the window as the aircraft pushed from the gate. High above the runway glow, one truth rose with her. Dignity flies higher than arrogance ever can.